with us on supporting producers throughout the state. So yeah, we're at 11:03 and we can go ahead and jump in. I'm going to do a quick introduction and then I'll hand it off to Hashim and Rachel to take you through the workshop today. So as we had mentioned, this is part of our we were recently awarded a grant from the Native American Agricultural Fund. We've done several programs with them in the past, so we're really excited. It's one of our favorite programs to run. And so usually we open up workshops to our NAF cohort. This year we have 13 producers, farmers, and chefs that we're working with. And so this year we decided to change it up and open our workshops to the general public and try to get as many people in here as possible. So we had over 30 registered for this workshop. We're hoping to get, at least 20 to 25. You guys see a good group on here already, and more are still joining. So again, thank you for joining. And with that, I'll hand it off to Hashim.
Hey everyone. First of all, for the farmers in our cohort, thank you guys so much for joining. And for the people who are not in our cohort, thank you as well for joining. Rachel Ryan's workshops are one of my favorite workshops. Every time I listen to them, I just learn so much and I miss a lot of things. So let me just admit Anita here. To the farmers, I have a few announcements coming up concerning supplies, graphic design for logos, and then kitchen space at IPCC. So just keep an eye out in your email for those announcements. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, just shoot me an email or text me. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over the mic to Rachel.
All right, let's see if I can get this up and going.
We still have people coming in. Let me stop my sharing screen and then.
All right. Okay, can everybody see? Have you seen the
Yes.
presentation? All right, good, good. All right, well, welcome. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your morning to attend this workshop. And again, if you have any questions, we'll have a question answer at the end. And then if you think of anything afterwards, you can email me. I'll have my email at the end, so you can email questions or things that you want to be on the next presentation. So next Wednesday, we'll have another workshop, and I can answer any remaining questions that you may have lingering. I think Hashim's going to have these slides and things available for folks because there'll be links in the slides if you want to follow up on some of them, to look up additional information or register for things throughout the workshop. So those will be available for you to review and read. So if I go pretty fast and you can't copy things down, these slides will be available for you to review and things like that, and click on those links. So don't get too scared. I could just focus in on the information and any questions that you may have. So this is Food Manufacturing and Regulatory Compliance Workshop. It's our first of 3 from Backyard Farms that we'll be providing. And then there'll be some other ones on business and so forth after that. So you'll want to stay for the full series and all that kind of stuff. So value added, you have a value added product and you want to start doing some food manufacturing. So things like salsas, if you have pies, anything that you could take a raw agriculture product, do something to it to kind of transform it to bring some additional value to it. That's a value added product. So it helps to increase profitability for your farm. But it's important to understand some of these food manufacturing rules. Now, the rules that I'll be presenting to you are just for the state of New Mexico. Different states will have different rules. So if you're in Arizona, the rules may be slightly different. Or if you're in Texas, it might be slightly different than those in New Mexico. And I'll just be covering those. There may be some slightly different rules in tribal jurisdictions from one to the other. I won't be getting into all of that nitty-gritty, so it's really just the state of New Mexico and federal compliance that we'll be focusing in on. And most of the state of New Mexico mirrors federal compliance. As I just kind of mentioned, regulations vary state by state, but we'll be focusing on the laws of New Mexico. Federal laws also apply to food safety, but most of our New Mexico laws do mirror these. So the main agency in New Mexico that we use is going to be the New Mexico Environmental Department. Now that's super, super confusing and everybody wonders why it's called the Environmental Department. Sometimes I'll call it the Environmental Health Department. In other states, this agency is called the Health Department. So I'll go back and forth, but its true name is the New Mexico Environmental Department, but they are the ones that regulate food kitchens and food manufacturing facilities and so forth. The other agency that applies in New Mexico is the New Mexico Department of Agriculture. They oversee all kinds of food products and farm products and things like that. Now, there's also some local regulations may apply. Those of you who are in the city of Albuquerque, the Albuquerque Environmental Health Department also oversees. So it's another level of regulation that applies on top of the state and federal regulations that may apply. So I might be referring to that for several of the others. That's really the only city that seems to have one layered on top. Most everybody outside of that just has the state and the federal agencies. The federal agencies that are going to apply is going to be the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. They oversee food. And the USDA, which is kind of the federal version of the NMDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So food manufacturing in New Mexico, it really depends on what products you're making and where it's made from, is what it all boils down to. So we're going to look at a couple of different case scenarios to go over what would apply in these particular cases. So for case one, we're looking at raw commodities that are consumed raw. So for instance, you have honey, and maybe you infuse it with some type of herb or spice or something like that. That's still considered a raw product for those honey growers of us, the apiaries. It will also be fruits and vegetables, raw fruits and vegetables. Dried chili also constitutes part of that. And then our nuts, if you do pecans or pistachios, things like that, they would fall under this. And so they would come under this New Mexico Department, the Environmental Department, and then the NMDA, the Department of Agriculture. And then it's subject to the rules of what's called FSMA, and that's the Farm Safety Modernization Act, which governs, and that's a rule from the FDA, and the USDA has GAP, which is Good Agricultural Practices. These are the two rules that govern raw types of food commodities. To get into that nitty gritty a little bit further, because we'll be referring to these quite often throughout the rest of it. The FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, went into law in 2011. Small farms then had to start complying in 23, and very small farms had to start complying with these rules and regulations by 24. So the last 2 years, very small farms all had to start complying with this officially. So small farms making less than $25,000 a year or less are, in the last 3 previous years are not covered by this rule. So you could be exempt if you're making less than $25,000. Then they say, well, you're really just doing this as a hobby, not as a business at that point, is how they do that cutoff. So if you are doing that, and then farms that are making more than $25,000 can be exempt if you meet 2 requirements. You're making less than $500,000. Wouldn't that be nice to be pulling in that kind of money? And in this time frame, you're selling direct to qualifying end consumers. And their definition of qualifying end consumers is a consumer of the food or a restaurant, retail, food establishment that's located in the same state or the same Indian reservation as the farm, not more than 275 miles from the farm. So you have customers coming out to purchase from you. So if you meet any of these 2, you can still be exempt if you're making more than 25,000. So a lot of us will still fall under this and can be exempt for either one of these 2. You're either too small or you're smaller than the 500,000. Kind of exempts a lot of us. But you can get into some of that nitty gritty and find out what all the FSMA rules are for this food safety. If you click on this link, when you get a hold of these slides, you can click on that and then you get all the nitty gritty details of the FSMA. Most of this has to do with making sure that you're using clean practices, that you're keeping your fertilizers away from your fields, that the water sources that you're using to water your crops and things like that, you're using clean tools to harvest, things like that. The way you're storing your crops and you're harvesting. It's just making sure that they're safe. Harvesting and growing practices, that the food's not being contaminated before it gets to consumers in these raw forms. If you want some more help, NMSU has their page to help, and sometimes this makes it a little more understandable than the official government page, can sometimes be in government mumble jumble and could be hard to understand. So NMSU has a much nicer page. Also, New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association has a food safety training, and they teach you all the rules of FSMA when you take this course. And this food safety training course has 2 tiers, tier 1 and tier 2. One teaches you on the farm food safety training, which pretty much covers all of FSMA. And then the other one will talk about post-harvest practices and things like that. And if you take that, then you're an expert on FSMA by the end of that, and you get food safety certification and so forth that meets all of FSMA requirements. And for those of you who are part of the AIBE program, you will be able to have access to that and be able to get free food safety training and free certification as part of that. If you are not part of the program, you can learn about more and click on that and go to the Farmers Marketing Association's webpage, and you can find out about their food safety trainings and sign up for some of those. And then, unfortunately, you'll have to pay for some of those classes if you're not part of the AIBE program. For those in the program, it's free for you through this program for those safety trainings. And I think we've got a couple of those lined up in February. So GAP is the one that is with the USDA, and that's the Good Agricultural Practices. So they're very similar to the FSMA. A lot of these overlap to a great extent in what they require for food safety, because food safety is food safety. But GAP is a certification that you get. There's a USDA harmonized GAP and GAP Plus certifications. And some of your buyers, especially the big buyers, grocery stores, things like that, will often require that you have GAP certification in order to buy produce and products from you. And this includes value-added products. Many of them will require that you're GAP certified before they'll buy things from you. And so to get GAP certification, you'll actually have to have an auditor will come onto your farm or wherever your food manufacturing facility is, and they will do an audit to make sure that you meet the certification and following all the food safety practices and things like that. So this is a completely voluntary certification program. It does cost money. It's about $1,200 to $1,500 last time. I checked. However, New Mexico does have a farmers marketing group. It's not the Farmers Marketing Association, but there's a farmers marketing group that we partner together with to get discounts that we cover the cost of auditors. They usually have to fly in an auditor from out of state to come and do auditing, and they can do auditing at a bunch of different farms and manufacturing facilities and so forth all at the same time. And then we reduce the cost of what their price is. So we can bring that price down from that $1,500 significantly. So if you're interested in that, contact me and I can get you in contact with this farmers group to get you some discount prices and group rates on some of your GAP certifications if you need that. There's also a USDA food safety certification for specialty crops, which you can contact the New Mexico Department of Agriculture. So our NMDA, our Department of Agriculture, works hand in hand with the USDA in partnership to be able to cover some of that, the specialty crop certifications. They have, if you contact Jorge Sandoval over at our NMDA, he can put you in contact and get you hooked up for that. They have certified auditors and things like that locally that can come out and do it on behalf of the USDA. They're trained for that and can help out with some of that. And again, some of the large buyers, some companies, some specialty groups. I've had some clients that have come to me and said, "Oh, my buyer now requires this. I have to have a GAP certification for my product." So if you do, this is one of the things that you'll be required to have to go through to get to be able to sell your product to that particular buyer. Albertsons definitely requires that in order to sell to them. And a number of them do. I'm not sure if Whole Foods does, but a lot of these different ones, especially the big chain stores, require that for food safety for their part. Now, case number 2, we talked about raw foods. These are simple raw foods. So things like dairy products. So if you're selling raw milk, bottled raw milk, you must have a grade A permit from the NMDA Dairy Bureau. So you can get your permits here. You have to have a HACCP plan. We'll get into a little bit more of HACCP plans later, but it's hazard analysis and critical control points. Basically, it's, oh my gosh, this is what can go wrong, and here's how we're going to prevent it, is in layman's terms what a HACCP plan is. And you set that up to make sure that there's no contamination that can happen to the milk, especially if you're doing things like raw milk. That becomes really important. But that's governed by the NMDA, and it's overseen by the FDA, but in our state, you need an NMDA license for that. Eggs are another one. If you're going to get rich now, the price of eggs had gone through the roof at one point not too long ago. And if you wanted to get rich selling eggs, you'll need, if you're an egg dealer, needs a license. If you sell over 5 cases, which is 30 dozen a week, then you need an egg dealer license. If eggs come in grades, you've probably seen grade A, grade B. It's based on the size of your eggs and the type of eggs. If you don't, and you just have a bunch of like backyard flock type eggs, and you just want to sell some of those at the farmer's market, you can get an ungraded egg license. There's no fees for that. You do have to pay a fee for a license for an egg dealer, but for an ungraded egg license, that's free. You just have to fill out the form and register that and register your farm with the NMDA. You can click on this link right here, ungraded egg sales registration. Just register with them. And then you can sell eggs from all your different chickens. And if you've got a bunch of heritage chickens that lay slightly different sizes and irregularities, and you've got some old chickens and some young chickens, and they crank them out all different sizes, it doesn't matter if they're all ungraded. Grocery stores and things like that can sell ungraded eggs. Unfortunately, restaurants cannot have ungraded eggs in their restaurant. It's a weird rule. So you won't be able to sell to restaurants, but you can sell grocery stores, farmers markets, all that type of stuff. Roadside stands, that works perfectly for. For honey, those who are doing honey, honey has to be properly labeled, especially if it's got additives, if you've added anything, chamomile or anything else in your honey, has to be on the label. Other than that, there's no license in New Mexico for honey growers or anything like that. However, the city of Albuquerque does require that you have a permit. So you will need to get a permit through the city of Albuquerque to sell your honey within the city limits of Albuquerque. So either sell your honey right outside the city or get that license to sell. If you have questions about anything that may suddenly change, an update with honey laws and restrictions, you could contact the New Mexico Beekeepers Association. Their phone number is here, and you can contact them to find out any updated or changing things. Nothing's changed in the last few years, but if there suddenly should be some ordinance that passes, if Congress is in, the state legislature's in session now, so they could change something, but I don't think honey is a top priority for them. So, but you can keep abreast of all that. Now, meat and poultry, this is a rough one. In the state of New Mexico, meat and poultry producers and processors are governed by the New Mexico Livestock Board. So meat, whether it's beef, pork, lamb, ostrich, emu, or other ratties, so other kinds of crazy birds, and that also includes game birds, quails, partridge, all those types of things that must be offered for sale must be slaughtered and processed in a state or federal inspection plant. As far as I know, there are no state, just simply state um, licensed facilities. They're all have to be USDA licensed facilities in New Mexico right now. So the USDA governs all meat inspections in the facilities that are available. We have a shortage of processing facilities in the state of New Mexico. This has been a huge problem for meat producers, ranchers, bang their heads against the wall and sometimes have a long wait to be able to get their animals processed. And the joke that they're going to fall over dead before they get butchered has been a long, frustrating thing. And certain things, game birds and things like that, the facilities may be rated for a particular type of thing, just for beef and pork and not for poultry, for instance. And so you've got to find one that meets the specificities of what you're doing. And it's been really hard for people who do the non-traditional, but still traditional, like rabbits and things like that, that have been part of New Mexico diets and backyard farmers for a long time. You can process these things for yourself and your own consumption, but you can't sell the meat anywhere, even though I know a lot of restaurants would love to have homegrown duck and rabbit and all those sorts of things. This is a big problem, and the state is trying to work on that, but we're still working on it. Case number 3 is the non-TCS. So these are temperature control sensitive processed foods. So these are these are non-temperature control. These are things that have a lot of sugars in them, are not subject to as much of the food spoilage as other things. They're not as high of food safety risk. So these are going to include baked goods, dried fruits, nut butters, high sugar jams and jellies. These are all governed by the Homemade Food Act, which was enacted in 2021. And under this Food Act, Homemade Food Act, you no longer need a permit from the New Mexico Environmental Department in order to sell these type of foods. You can sell them at farmers markets and all kinds of things, but the seller must have a sign stating that it's a homemade food, that it wasn't processed in a manufacturing facility of any kind, and it was not supervised by the New Mexico Environmental Department. So it's kind of eat at your own risk, but as long as consumers know that it was made in a home kitchen. Sellers do, however, they must obtain an approved food handler's license before beginning production. So the ANIS is the National Accreditation Board. If you go to the New Mexico Environmental Department's website, and we'll get to that a little bit later, there's a list of approved courses and classes you could take online, and they don't usually take that long, maybe about an hour at tops. You could take it online to get a food handler's card, and you can print that card, and there's programs that are approved for that. Don't get scammed. There's programs out that have a course that's $50, $100. It should only be about $12 to $15 for the course and the certification. And so if you go to the New Mexico Environmental Department's website, they'll have a list of approved programs, and those are the ones that have the accreditation, and go through those and click through those and look for the ones that have prices and things like that that are not going to rip you off, that are still approved. There's English and Spanish. You could take either those classes in whatever you're most comfortable with, that they're available. So you do have to have that, and anybody who's working and helping you make your food. So if you have your kids helping you, they need to get that too. Your spouse or somebody else, if they're going to help you make the bread or help with making your jams and things like that. Anybody touching the food needs to know. And it's just basic food safety, how to handle food without contaminating it. So you're not getting stuff that has cat hair in it and all that kind of stuff. We want to make sure people are getting safe food. So the foods must be sold directly to the customer within the state. So you can't sell this to a store or a restaurant or anything else, it has to go from you to the customer who's going to use it. There can't be any third parties involved when you're selling homemade foods, because the customer needs to know who made it and be able to ask you questions directly. When did this come out of the oven? When did this happen? Do you have cats in your house? Do you have, for allergens, those sorts of things, they can ask you all these sorts of things. I'm allergic to canaries. Do you have a canary in your house? Something like that, they can ask you directly. That a regular grocery store couldn't answer for you, because they only deal with things that come out of manufacturing facilities that follow a whole other set of rules. Private farmers markets and other private venues may not allow you to sell foods. They do have a right to discriminate. So if your farmer's market may, and I haven't seen any yet, but in theory, they could say no homemade foods are allowed at this event. They do have the right to discriminate that way. Specific rules about the kitchen, transportation, and labeling must be met. And here's the Home Food Safety Act. Basically, if it's a temperature or something, basically you can't leave your breads baking in the hot sun on the dashboard of your truck, those sorts of things for hours. Use the food safety, and once you've taken your food safety handler's card, those sorts of things will be obvious. But if you need all of the rules and regulations for that, the link to the actual act is here and here that you can click on. Some local regulations may apply. Once again, Albuquerque's Environmental Department may have some different rules that they may apply for labeling and things like that, and they are subject to change rather frequently. So it's hard for me to keep up with Albuquerque's ever-changing rules for their health department. Other special cases, if you do the cannabis, hemp, CBD, these growers are regulated by the New Mexico Department of Agriculture, and the Environmental Department also covers any other, if they're extracts and things like that. Consumables are covered by the Environmental Department as a food item. Other things are covered, the actual plants themselves are kind of covered by the NMDA. So if you're growing, it's the NMDA. The extracts, consumables, supplements, and other things are all going to be covered by the Environmental Department. You will need special cannabis license, and you'll need a manufacturing license as well to be able to make any of these products, use, handle, sell, anything that has to do with, you'll need a cannabis license. And believe it or not, if you're growing the plants themselves, in addition to cannabis-specific things, you'll actually need a nursery license to be able to plant a seed and grow the seedlings. You'll need to get that from the New Mexico Department of Agriculture. We've had a couple of people who've run into some issues and not realized that and gotten cited for not having a nursery license on top of all of their stacks and stacks of cannabis license. So make sure you have all of that, so you're a legal beagle when it comes to dealing with cannabis. Alcohol and alcohol-containing beverage products, they're controlled by the New Mexico Alcohol Beverage Control Division of the New Mexico Regulations and Licensing Department. If you want, you need to have a license to serve permit. And the regulations recently underwent some drastic changes. They now have a 3-tier system. You used to only have a couple of licenses and everyone had to fight over them, or someone had to die to get one. They've now overhauled and have some more fair licensing out there. And it just went into effect last July. So you can click on these links and look some of that up. And if you're mixing cannabis in alcohol products, oh, God help you. I can't, because it's a little more complicated and way above my pay grade. You will have to get the New Mexico Environmental Department together with the New Mexico Regulatory and Licensing Department to figure out how to handle that one. I imagine it would sell wonderfully, whatever product that you would be selling, but it would be a nightmare from a regulatory standpoint to be able to handle. Case number 5, all other processed foods. So these are more of probably what you were imagining and thinking of for manufactured foods. So this includes dehydrated foods, things like dehydrated fruits and fruit jerkies, meat jerkies. Meat jerkies must meet the USDA regulations we kind of mentioned earlier. Product distribution determines the regulatory agency if it's going to stay within New Mexico or go outside to the rest of the nation. It gets a little complicated. The meat situation is always a really frustrating, difficult situation to deal with. So my best advice is stay away, stay far, far away right now. Baked goods, shelf stable and refrigerated ones. Shelf stable would be things like canned goods, refrigerated ones. Refrigeration depends on the water activity level, how moist it is, will depend on its shelf life, and will determine some of that. These are where we get into those temperature time controlled sensitive foods that we had mentioned before. Tortillas are another one. Juices and bottled water are another considered manufactured food. Refrigerated and frozen foods are other ones. Seafood and shellfish, even though that doesn't sound like it's a big thing in New Mexico, believe it or not, we do consume a lot of seafood and shellfish, and freshwater catfish farms are quite popular here, and tilapia farms are popular here in New Mexico. We've got quite a few of those. Acidified foods are the canned foods that are going to be like salsas. They're considered acidified foods, and those are very popular here in New Mexico. Low acid foods, canned foods, are going to be things like jellies and jams. And these again are canned. So unlike the homemade stuff, these are sealed in sealed cans in a cannery. So that means if they're not sealed correctly, these are things that can get botulism, things like that with both of these. Dried foods, these are going to be like your chips and things like that, candies. Lyophilization, which is a fancy word for freeze drying, which is what we specialize in here at Backyard Farms. And there's so many more. So all of these are this case number 5. So food manufacturing and food safety plans. When you start your apply for a food manufacturing license, you're going to get that from the New Mexico Environmental Department. And as you apply for that, you're going to need to have a food safety plan. And that's usually guided by the rules of the FDA. So if you've gotten your GAP and your FSMA plans in place, you've already gotten a huge head start on all of that. Sorry about that. My throat's getting a little dry. They'll give you a huge head start on all this documentation, but you'll need to customize it for your specific manufacturing, the type of food and how you're manufacturing it, whether it's one of those temperature time control sensitive type foods, or whether it's shelf stable, how it's being kept. So the good manufacturing practices, these GMPs, the FDA has issued some operating procedures for personnel, facilities, grounds, all that kind of stuff. So if you click on this link, it'll give you a jump start on downloading some of those documents to give you some templates on how to do those. They're really helpful to getting started. Like, how often do I need to clean my mixing machine? How often do I need to clean my bagging machine? This will give you a great head start on a lot of those sorts of things. And then we'd mentioned before the HACCP plan. This is the oops, oh no, what happens when something goes wrong? is the layman's terms. It's officially the hazard analysis and critical control points. So again, it's what can go wrong, what can and will go wrong. You have to plan for all of that. So it's prevention program for analyzing and controlling of biological. So this would be things like fungus and bacteria getting into your salsa, or chemical. What if your detergent bottle spills and you get a cleaner into one of your mixes, or physical hazards. You know, some of those ladies like to have those acrylic nails. What if by the time you're done mixing a batch, you're missing one? Oops, there's got to be one in there, or you've suddenly realized your wedding ring's gone. It's got to be in one of those bags. Those are physical hazards, and you have to account for all of that. So what can go wrong will. What are all the possible bad things that can happen, and how can you prevent them? How can you trace these things back? So sometimes good practices, wearing gloves, making sure people don't have, if they're physically handling, don't have fake nails on or wear sufficient gloves so the nails can't come off. Don't wear rings, don't have earrings. Hair nets are on so earrings and things can't come off. Those sorts of things. Chemicals are kept far away from mixing bowls for food. All of these sorts of things. And the FDA has a really great HACCP website with some great ideas for how to set up your HACCP plan so that you can prevent all of these bad things from happening. No one wants to be the one to open a bag of chips and find a dead mouse in there. This is how you prevent that. The things you don't think about, but also have to be in your HACCP plan. Bioterrorism. That's the newest thing that has shown up, and now you have to have a bioterrorism preparedness plan as part of your safety plan. What if someone is trying to adulterate your food and tamper with your food products? How do you prevent that? And how do you detect when that's going on? First of all facilities are required to register with the FDA. That way they can warn you if something's going on. They could say that there are suspects that are going around and pretending to be laundry people, sneaking into facilities. So if you don't recognize the people who are picking up your laundry as regular, be on the lookout. And they'll let you know for certain things that could be happening in your area. So you want to register your facility there. The food defense plan, you have to have one. Sometimes food security could be something, when you think of bioterrorism, it's somebody from outside trying to commit terrorism against the nation or something. But sometimes food's defense plan could be somebody trying to hurt people from the inside. It could be someone trying to ruin your business. It could be a competitor. It could be a disgruntled employee with mental illness problems, things like that. If some of you have ever watched any of those like murder shows and you've seen the one on like the Tylenol murders, and the whole reason we have those bans that are on the Tylenol and all of our medicine bottles and things like that. That lady who tried to murder her husband went around tampering with Tylenol bottles and poisoning them. So her husband, who would take regular Tylenol, would buy a bottle of Tylenol from like a Walgreens or something and was going to buy it and then eat it and then die, and she wouldn't get implicated. And so she poisoned all these Tylenols, and all these innocent people died as a result from that. And that's why now we have these security bans to make sure they're tamper-proof bottles and things like that. That would be considered a food defense plan, is now to put tamper-proof sorts of things to show sealing bags and things like that to make sure that it's tamper-proof in some way. The FDA has some templates for how to develop your food defense plan so that you don't get implicated in Tylenol murders and so forth. There's some pretty interesting documentaries if you watch that one out there, if you're into those murder shows. Food manufacturing, your product registration. So once you have your product, you've developed all of your food safety plans and all those sorts of things, you then need to register your product with the New Mexico Environmental Department in what's called a process review. First, you have to have a list of your ingredients, the sources and types, the brands, the volumes of each ingredient to use in your product. Now, when you submit these to the New Mexico Department of Agriculture, the New Mexico Environmental Department, you can have them sign an NDA for trade secret so that they keep it completely confidential and don't reveal any of your trade secrets to any competitors or anybody else. So it's kept completely confidential. But you do need to release to them what's in it. They do need to know. You also need to release to them step by step how you prepare your product. So even if you have a trade secret in your process and the way that you do it, But again, you can have them sign the NDA so they can't release to anybody any of your trade secrets. You're going to submit this whole process review with these sorts of things for them to review for compliance. They're going to make sure that everything in it is okay. The way you produce it, the steps for your product are food safe and are going to meet standards and things like that. They may require you have a nutritional analysis if you don't already have one done to be able to do a nutritional label. You've probably seen those on the back where they tell the calories and the fats and all those sorts of things. So you may have to do a nutrition test to have that label. They'll want to see that on there. They may require additional testing after they review all these things to say, we need to know what the pH is of your food. If your pH is below a certain, above a certain amount, and it's not an acidified food, it runs a risk of food safety. And you may have to take additional steps to heat your product to a certain temperature, seal it in a certain way, or do something to ensure additional product safety. They may require water conductivity tests. If it's, for instance, when you're doing dehydrated jerkies or freeze-dried or things like that, if it's below a certain amount of dryness, it's considered too dry for bacteria and things to grow. And then you don't have to add any preservatives and things to it. But you have to prove that it really is that dry. And so if you do the water conductivity test, you can prove that to them. So you have to show them it really does have below the danger level of moisture in it. So pH, that, and they may require microbial tests. If they say your food just doesn't seem safe to us, that what you're doing isn't safe, you may have to prove it to them and then send off your food for food testing and show them that it's microbially safe and your product is sound. So the process review, you may have to get a process authority to go over your steps with you to prove that it's safe and what you're doing is adequate for food safety. The packaging is right, all those sorts of things. And places like NMSU will have a process authority to make sure your process review will be accepted by the New Mexico Environmental Department. And this has to be done for each product. So for instance, if you have a salsa and you have regular salsa, jalapeno salsa, and mango salsa, you have to, those are 3 different products according to the New Mexico Environmental Department. You will have to have 3 different process reviews, one for each flavor. And every time you change the flavor, even if you only change one ingredient, jalapeno to mango, you have to do this whole thing all over again and register that product with the New Mexico Environmental Department. And here's a link to the New Mexico Food Safety Laboratory where they can run a bunch of these different types of tests that you need, and they can provide guidance for the process review and help you prepare for that for the New Mexico Environmental Department. Some other certifications that you may want to get for your food manufacturing business. Again, we mentioned the food handler's card. Again, here is the link that you can click on for the NMDA approved programs for that. All of your team members, anybody who handles your food has to have that, whether it's homemade food or manufactured. For those who may be doing jarred salsas, jams, jellies, those sorts of things, you might want to have the Better Process Control School, AKA the canning school, canning foods classes in school. NMSU offers these classes in English and in Spanish. Different times, it's a week-long class, so it is a long one. And there are different partners that we have that may be able to offset the cost of these classes. They can be expensive. They're a couple $100 because it's a week-long class. It's pretty intense, but contact me and we can see if we can hook you up with some partners who may have some grants and things like that to help offset the class if that's something you're interested in doing. The food protection manager. Food protection managers are not required for manufacturing. It's required for commercial kitchens, but not food manufacturing. But if you want a list of NMED approved programs for that to get that certification, you can click on the link here and it should take you to that. Also, we suggest that if you're a food manufacturer, that you get a general liability insurance. Highly recommended for your operation. I can't suggest that enough. You could get some pretty affordable programs throughout New Mexico, insurance carriers who do this for businesses, and then they specialize in food businesses and ag businesses. I would highly recommend getting that. You never know. What if all of this just sounds like it's way, way, way too much work for you? That's where a co-packer may be the best thing for you. Co-packers are services providers that can mix and make your food product for you. They can make your salsa, they can make your brownies, whatever it is that you're wanting. They can cook, bake, smoke, whatever it is. They find one that has a commercial kitchen if it requires kitchen services. They can also do dehydrating and freeze drying. There are those out there. We specialize in freeze drying here at Backyard Farms. There are those that do bottling, jarring, and packing. They should have a host of services to carry you through from whatever you need. We, for instance, do freeze drying. We will take your raw products, we'll wash, chop, freeze dry, bag, package, and seal, and have it ready to go to your customer. And we have the manufacturing license, so you don't have to go out and get the license, and we can operate under our license and all of that. So your product can pass right through us and have our license, and then is ready to go right on shelves. We have the GAP certification, we have the license, and all of those sorts of things. And so you can operate underneath our license. And the same would be true if you're going to jar salsa. There are jarring and canning co-packers, and then you would operate underneath their license. Those sorts of things. We have a brand new director of the food safety laboratory that just started up at NMSU, so we can get a lot of those testing programs done for nutritional testing, for water activity, for microbial and all those sorts of things. So Dr. Louise Sabion Gellies will be the one who will be doing a lot of your testing. For those who are in the AIBE NAF program participants, your laboratory testing is free. It's part of the program, and we'll be able to cover that for your products. And we look forward to helping you with our next workshop, which is going to be on packaging and labeling, to be able to show you what you need to have to be able to get this out onto market. And if you have any questions and things like that, topics you want covered, my email is right here. It's backyardfarms with an S, LC for Las Cruces @gmail.com. And hopefully we're finishing close on time. We've got about 10 minutes for questions and things like that.
And just to recap, everyone, the slides and a link to the recording will be available to you guys. So if anyone has any questions. Cleo?
Looks like Cleo.
Yeah. So I know that Rachel, you did a freeze drying from the farm of just specifically just the raw product, like the squash, the melon. We love it. The apples. The kids eat the crab apples like chips. So
Oh,
I had to
good.
put it in storage so we can use it for catering events, right? It's where we don't have to carry the whole apple and plus the weight. So that's been really great, game changer. So I'm ready for the next phase, which is an actual like soup, like to be freeze dried, where you just add the water and the protein. I don't want to get too technical with the meats because that seems like a lot, right? I don't know
Meats
how
are a
does
little
that. Yeah.
difficult. We can talk a little bit after. We'll have some
Okay.
consulting one-on-one with each of you, and we can go over all the specifics.
Okay.
But yeah, we can definitely do straight up vegetarian, and then we can add meat, for if you're catering
Something to add.
events and things, and then you just throw the meat right in and have that ready
Yes.
to go.
So I'm ready for whenever that's available to do that part. Yes.
We're ready anytime you are. Whenever you
Awesome.
have your soup ready, send it on down. We're ready to
Okay.
do that.
We're
And that's
gonna
the
bring
same
it
for
up.
everyone.
Yes, I was saying we wanted to bring up like the first week or probably next week since it's already almost Friday. But I want to get that started in the kitchen. And then I'll talk with you and make a one-on-one.
Sure. And we have drop-off locations in Albuquerque and so forth that we work
Oh,
with. And you can just drop it off. And once a week, they bring stuff down to us. So if you the La Montanita Co-op is there, and
okay.
they have a drop-off, and you can drop it off anytime with them, and then they'll deliver it right to our doorstep, and so we can get it here, and then we can send it right back to you.
Okay. Well, there's also I'm also already a client at the iPick kitchen. And
Okay.
so I was already wondering because we were saying as soon as we get this class over, we were gonna do a couple vats of it and then put it in sheets and freeze it in the freezer and
Yeah,
package it gallon size bags. Just be ready to for pickup. Is that an option or should I
that's
still take it
perfect.
to
That'd be
Montanita?
perfect.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome.
Freezing
Awesome.
is perfect. You can send it down frozen. You can send it chilled. We can do it either.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That'll work. Janice?
Hi guys. Thank you
Hey,
so much, Rachel, for all of that information. So my question is, how long do NDAs normally go? So I'm working on an NDA now, and I'm just curious with like what is that time frame? Is that a 3 year, 5 year? I guess depending on like your worker, I'm not too sure, but what is that norm go? Do you know like what that NDA, how long that goes for?
yeah, typically in the industry, it's like 3 to 5 years is a typical, but you can have it however long you need for your business. I've seen them go
Okay.
up to 10 years, but typically it ranges from 3 to 5.
Okay. And
Yeah,
then
and you
and
just want to
then
include that in that wording in there when you
Hmm.
create it. Yeah.
right. Okay. And then what if you're selling outside of state? Like let's say we have sales outside of state and they want to buy the salsa. How do those regulations apply? If I mean, of course they're here, but they don't really apply to, let's say, Alaska. And we're just shipping out there.
Yeah, so the license with the NMDA will apply. So they do because they do follow federal regulations, the FDA. So
Okay.
the FDA doesn't really issue a license necessarily, so they rely on each of the states to do all their regulations and things like that. And so in theory, the states can apply more stringent than the FDA. And some states do. In fact, New Mexico applies a much more stringent regulations than the FDA does, but they definitely follow all of the FDA rules. So the manufacturing license from the NMED are recognized nationwide. So if we are freeze drying your salsa and then you send that to Alaska, it will be recognized, that license,
Okay. Perfect.
because we are registered with the FDA. So our manufacturing facility is registered, and our license
Okay.
with the environmental department is registered with them. So if they look it up from Alaska, they'll be able to see it on the FDA's website. There's a FDA
Perfect.
website that they can look up and see food manufacturing facilities and who's registered and who isn't, and all of those sorts of things. And then that's why a lot of them too switch over to GAP and want the GAP license because that's a federal and it's the same everywhere. Um,
Okay.
and so some of them will, on top of that, on top of your manufacturing license, want a GAP certification as well. And
Got you.
we have both. We have both
Awesome.
the environmental department and USDA GAP certification. So we can provide you both of those license. And if you want those printed, and we'll talk about that next week, if you want those
Yes.
printed directly on your packages, so there's no question, the consumer can see it right on your packaging. So there's no questions asked. We can print it right on the package.
Yeah, I'd love to have that conversation with you, Rachel, offline, with that because thank you, NMSU, all of you guys, Rachel, for this opportunity to do this, and it really has opened up doors for us to ship our salsa out of state. And so that was the reason why I was asking. And I do have one more question. So I do one, of course, the process stays the same, what we're using, our ingredients stay the same. However, we do need a mild salsa, which would require just toning down the amount of jalapenos and the peppers, right? Do I need to do a whole nother form for that? I know you mentioned that, that would apply if it was a mango salsa, right?
Yeah.
But does it
They,
also apply to this if we're just holding
the
back on?
heat intensity does not change. So as long as you're still
Okay,
using the same amount of jalapeno, or the same amount of green chili. But if you're switching from jalapeno to green chili, then it does change the recipe
right.
because that's a different ingredient. But if you're just switching from medium to mild or
Okay,
hot to medium, that doesn't change because even though you're correct, the amount of capsaicin in it does change. They don't recognize that as a chemical change that's enough of a difference. The ingredient
okay,
hasn't changed. There's still the same
perfect.
amount of jalapeno in there.
Right. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And just for your info, freeze dry and dehydrated are things that are actually allowed to go international as well. So with those licenses, you can actually sell in Europe. We just sent a whole bunch of it to Taiwan, freeze dried and stuff that they're really enjoying. So
Amazing. That's
yeah, we're sending
amazing.
it the other way. They used to send a lot of that stuff over here, and you see that in the stores, but now we're sending it back the other way.
Wow.
And
Thank you.
yeah, so and it definitely does. It's considered food safe because insects and pathogens and things like that cannot live on freeze dried. So it's very easy to ship internationally. And for
Excellent.
all the
Well,
rest,
go
oh,
ahead,
Yes,
Rachel.
I
Sorry
was
to,
just going
yeah,
to say,
please.
yeah, we'll be setting up meetings with each of you. So if you want to reach out to me to set up consulting meetings, we'll meet with each of you and go over whatever your products are, whatever you're thinking about doing. And we can go over personally, what you want to do, the best way to do it. If you haven't made your mind up and you're thinking about a couple, we can go over all those sorts of things. My email is right here, and I'll try reaching out to each of you. And even those of you who are not in the program and are now spurred to want to do some things, you can reach out and we can work with you to help you inspire your dreams and help your products come to market.
Yeah. So with that,
sure.
yeah, that we're at our full hour, and thank you again so much, Rachel. Round of applause for Rachel for sharing her wealth of knowledge. We'll be back. Rachel will be sharing again with us next week on Wednesday, same time at 11. If you're not registered for that, we'll be sending out the registration links again. Thank you to Hashim for helping take the lead on this and navigate it. So Hashim, if you have anything else for him.
No, just keep an eye out for emails. I'll be updating you guys pretty frequently. And if you guys need anything, please text, call, or email. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Didn't even get a chance to take a look at the chat. I'm so busy.
Yeah, I've been keeping an eye on
Oh,
it.
good,
So,
good.
one
I was
person
going to
said they're
say
gonna,
that to you guys in the beginning, like keep an eye on the
yeah,
chat. I'm so busy with. I can
yeah, I've
only
been keeping.
multitask so much.
Yep, yep. Takes a team. There's one person that'll email some questions. But other than that, there was no other
Okay.
questions that popped up. Just good conversation.
Rachel,
Hashim, do
if
you
you
want
don't
to